This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy walawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West. For That Team Out West, I'm Ted LaRue. We continue our fall camp interview series here today, and we are looking at the defensive side of the football, taking a defensive deep dive with my guy Dale from Autzen Zoo, a part of the fan-sided network over there. Dale Bliss, it's great to have you on here today. And let's start talking about the defensive side of the football. A lot of media outlets, national media outlets, PFF, things like that, have Oregon as a top 10 defense nationally. There's a lot of expectations for the defensive side of the ball here right now. What questions do you think this unit has to answer by the end of the season for them to really know that they're going to slot in to the top 10 group when all is said and done in November, December, and hopefully into January?
Well, Ted, that's a great question. At Big Ten Media Days back in July, Mateo Uiagalelei said that the defense was probably as talented as it was last year, but the only difference was experience. So that has to be the first question, is how quickly they can get these guys up to speed. They've got a ton of talent. In the last 2-3 years, Dan Lanning has stacked all kinds of talent for the defense, 4- and 5-star guys, but they haven't played a lot. So it's the biggest question for the defense is how quickly they can get those guys up to speed, on assignment, consistent from snap to snap.
Well, here's the thing about that kind of question that I think we want answered, that these guys are going to be in the right spot. I think the early part of this season is very favorable towards the defense, and the new part of the defense, I think when we talk about that, we're specifically talking about the secondary with outside of Dylan Thieneman, and that's a very young group in there. Do you kind of feel the same way where that first part of the season, Montana State, look, I know they're a great FCS program. Oklahoma State didn't win a Big 12 game last year. You have Oregon State at home. The only road game period before you go to Penn State for that whiteout game is against Northwestern. So do you think that's kind of going to help as well for them to kind of figure everything out with all these young pieces early in the season?
I so agree. I think that's a good breakdown of the situation. I think it's really important that the Ducks exercise a little bit of game control in those first 4 games. They need to get the 2s and 3s and 4s in the game, right. Find out what they can do, find out if they're ready for live football. So it's very important. I think it helps them a lot to have a guy like Thieneman in the secondary to anchor things. He'll direct traffic. He'll be a coach on the field. He's incredibly meticulous about film study. So he'll have those guys in the right spots, and he'll be able to clean things up if somebody's out of position.
Yeah, and it's kind of last year there were a few games out there where it's just like, it was right on teetering 3-score game and a 4-score game. And you really wanted to see them really put that game away and get a lot of these young guys in it. But that was there were a few games out there where it just kind of just hung around there. And you saw maybe a lot of the 1s and the 1Bs or 2s really get more time instead of the 3s, instead of the 4s. So, yeah, I think you're right on the money that says, hey, let's put this game away. Let's flex our muscle. Let's do what Oregon does. And then certainly let's get those other guys on the field. So we mentioned Big Ten Media Days, certainly before, back in July. Mateo Uiagalelei and Bryce Betcher represented Oregon at that event in Las Vegas. These are guys that were recruited by Oregon that have been developed within this program. There's some folks out there that say transfer you, but I think, Dale, you and I know that that's not necessarily true the way they kind of say it out there. But how important is it to have these types of guys? That guys that have been there, that have believed in the program since day one, since they were coming out of high school. Of course, we know Bryce, the Eugene kid, and Mateo coming out of St. John Bosco there in Southern California. How important is it to have guys that have been there since day one as leaders of this defense?
It's absolutely crucial, particularly when they're surrounded by younger players. And it's nice that Oregon has a leader on each level of the defense. You know, Mateo in the defensive line room, Bryce Betcher in the linebacker room, and Thieneman at the back end. So those are guys that are going to set the pace in the weight room, in the film room, in practice. They're the ones who are going to speak up on the sideline if there's a problem or something that needs correcting. So it's incredibly important and useful when you have a young team to have that base of sound leadership. Tatum Tuioti is another guy I'd put in that category, also developed at Oregon. It's really bizarre that people say that Dan Lanning can't develop players or they're transfer you. This is only his fourth year as a coach. This is the first class to reach their redshirt sophomore and junior years. Josh Connerly was his first recruit to reach draft eligibility. So to say he can't develop people, well, we're just now seeing that. He hasn't had time to this point for that to happen.
I certainly try to tune that out as best as I can, but sometimes you certainly see a lot of it out there as well. And that's kind of a mantra and really a theme for this team this year. I know he said double down at Big Ten Media Days, but this is just a lot of Dan Lanning recruited players that are going to get the opportunity to really step up this season. Okay, so this is kind of going to be a little bit of a love fest for me because this is a position group that I just think is going to be awesome this year, and it's the defensive line. And when I talk about the defensive line, I'm going to throw in the edge guys certainly in that group as well. This is a group that's really deep, and the thing I think that really stands out to me is the measurables of this guy. People are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 320, 330, 340. I mean, this is a Big Ten defensive line. There is absolutely no doubt about it, but you got Derek Harmon, who was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. You got Jamari Caldwell that was drafted in the third round. I know it sounds kind of crazy when you lose that guy. You lose Jordan Birch, who was also drafted as well. In theory, if you're kind of using the NFL draft slot as a measuring stick, you say, well, to be as good as last year's group, you got to have a first-round pick. You got to have a third-round pick. You got to have these types of guys certainly within this defensive line. How do you feel that this group kind of stacks up with maybe last year's group that had a lot of NFL talent on it?
The big question there is how well Bear Alexander does in replacing Derek Harmon. Harmon last year, 55 quarterback pressures, 5 sacks, something like 11 or 12 tackles for loss. He was a monster. He was disruptive. He changed the line of scrimmage, and he did it game after game. He was the key to Oregon's defense, their run defense. Getting that inside pressure creates so many opportunities for the outside guys because they have time to get home, and the quarterback has nowhere to go. It keeps him in the pocket. He can't step up. So Alexander coming over from USC, he was a 4-star kid out of Terrell, Texas, had all kinds of hype. Dan Lanning helped recruit him at Georgia, but he's never really put it all together. In spring, the Duck coaches praised his work ethic, said he was the hardest worker on the defensive line and ready to turn that corner and become a productive defensive lineman. I feel that he'll make that leap, but as Dan Lanning always says, the proof's in the pudding. He's got to produce at game time. He's got to create those disruptions. Alongside him, you've got Amari Washington, who Tony Tuioti said toward the end of the year was one of Oregon's best defensive linemen. He didn't give us much playing time because he had 2 NFL guys in front of him. But, he's 6'3", 320, really hard to move. And I think he's going to have a breakout year as well. Lots of good depth behind him. The 4 stars like Aiden Breeden, Jericho Johnson. I mean, it's a deep group. A lot of talent. If they get some snaps and develop during September, they could be really strong.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I'm glad you mentioned Bear Alexander first because he seems really like a pivot point. You got Teon Gray. Terrence Green played a good amount. I think he played like 6 or 7 games in last season as well. So, I mean, yeah, Bear seems to be, right, that starter that's going to be able to line up on the interior next to Amari Washington next season. And I'm like, if Bear, for whatever reason, is maybe not up to, and he kind of has maybe similar issues that he's had in the past, you're kind of then banking on some of these redshirt freshmen and some of these younger guys as well, whereas Bear is a little bit more experienced. So if Bear is kind of playing up to that level, then your depth, especially not only for this year, but also for next year, you get some of those guys a little bit more experienced. So I agree with you. Bear is certainly that guy. Let's move to the linebacker room. This is very interesting to me for a couple of reasons. Despite being banged up through early fall camp, Devin Jackson slated to start alongside Bryce Betcher in the middle for the Ducks this season. Now, once you get beyond those guys, a lot of opportunity. Dan Lanning said after the spring game, when he was asked, hey, you going to go to the portal? Dan says, nope, feel really good. Feel really good about this group, but these are guys that are unproven. What's your confidence that you have in this group that the Braden Platts of the world, the Dylan Williams, the Jerry Mixons, the Kamar Matudis of the world are they're going to be able to keep the strong level of play when like Bryce isn't on the field or Devin Jackson may not be on the field?
That's a big concern. And Devin Jackson is the guy has 10.54 speed in the 100 meters.
So fast.
He was a state champion in Nebraska in the 100 meters. So all kinds of athletic ability, but he's never been completely healthy. And he maybe has a little trouble with consistency in his assignments. And so he's got to take a step up. If he's going to be a full-time starter next to Betcher. Betcher had 94 tackles last year. He's a proven commodity at 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, had his first interception of his career against UCLA. But they've got to find linebackers best come in pairs. You have to have a tandem up there. I mean, think about some of the great defensives of Oregon's past, going all the way back to 94. You had Rich Rule and Jeremy Asher. You had, Clay Matthews and Casey Matthews and Spencer Paysinger. You've always had 2, Kiko Alonso and Michael Clay. You got to have a tandem in the middle, guys who are kind of in sync. One plugs the A gap, one plugs the B gap, sure. And they converge on the outside rush. And right now, the Ducks don't have that. They've got to develop that other guy. Braden Platt made some nice plays in the spring game. Kamar Mathudi and Dylan Williams were both top 200 players. Top 200 players, 4-star kids, but they haven't played a lot, just a game or 2 apiece. So they've got to step into much bigger roles. I want to back up just a second because one thing I failed to mention is the depth they have at edge rusher. When you have Zadavian Sims and Elijah Rushing and Blake Purchase and Ashton Porter out there, those guys are all quick, high motor guys. Nasir Wyatt, the true freshman, incredibly explosive. So if they get a chance to develop them, there's some playmakers in that group. It's just a question of which ones emerge first.
I'm glad you kind of circled back to that edge rusher because shame on me for not talking about Blake Purchase because I've been purchasing Blake all offseason, especially during that spring game, man. I've rewatched that game like play by play, and I kind of rewind the play a couple of times. Maybe a couple of times, twice I've kind of rewinded the spring game. And it seems like every play 17 was on the field. He was involved in the play. Now I get it. They're going to, they mix and match the roster. So they might be going up against a freshman offensive tackle or something. So, let's keep that in mind. But man, he was all over the field every single play. And I just I'm so pumped about what he can truly be. That outside linebacker, edge rusher type of slot this season. What's kind of your thoughts on Blake? Are you as high on him as I am, or am I on an island a little bit here?
No, I agree with you. And okay. Mateo mentioned him at Media Day as well. Yep. Just a guy who could be really disruptive. He really flashed as a true freshman, and played 8 or 9 games as a true freshman and looked really good. Set out last year in redshirt. And I think he's really ready to just blow up. If he gets some playing time, he'll make some things happen.
No, and you get him kind of really trying to vault on the performance of 2023. and you get him going. We know what Tatum and Mateto most likely will be able to be, and some of those other names you mentioned. It's depth is such a big part on the defensive line to be able to rotate so many bodies. Michigan has been great at that the last couple of years, where they kind of have their guys at the top, but man, they just can keep everybody fresh, especially towards the end of the season. So you talked about this group, Dale, before, and we're going to finish it off because this is the most intriguing position group to me for the defense, and it's a position group that needed to get better. It's the secondary. Right, we go back these last 2 seasons. Oregon's national championship hopes have bowed out because, plain and simple, they couldn't cover some of the best receivers in the game. Jeremiah Smith in the Rose Bowl, Roma Dunze, for example, in the Pac-12 championship game, and others on those respective teams certainly as well. I call it a line change here. I'm here in Minnesota. We're all about hockey. 5 guys out, 5 guys in, kind of a deal, right? So we know Dylan Thieneman. We talked about him before. He is a stud at safety. But which young names taking over in this group really excite you the most?
It's really exciting because in the last 2 years, they've gotten longer, faster, and more athletic in the secondary. There's more talent in the secondary than any secondary since, Thurman and Bird back in the early 2010s. I mean, they've got guys who can play the ball, who can make plays on the ball. And we saw that in the spring. Ife Obadegwu and Offord and McNutt all out there just, taking the ball away. They're finding and locating it and matching up. And that was beautiful to see. Those are 3 guys I think will really emerge this year. Obadegwu has a chance to be a starter. I think he's about 6'1", 195. Offord and McNutt were both 5-star recruits. They look like they're going to play early. Jaleel Florence is back, and that's huge. He could be Oregon's best cover corner, a guy who could really lock down over there. Dalen Austin, you don't know about how his legal troubles will turn out, but he certainly has some talent. But it's a deep, deep group. I love the safeties. You got Kingston Lopa, who is 6'5", 200, and Woodyard and Flowers are both really good players. Sion Lalea didn't play a lot as a JUCO transfer last year, but when he got into a game against Illinois, he made us about as beautiful a pick as you'll ever see a defensive back make one-on-one. He ran the route like he was the receiver. It was a beautiful play. So when they can go 8 or 9 deep like that, Ted, I mean, that's some real possibilities to really match up and play stronger at the end of the year when you're playing those top quality receivers.
Yeah, you talk about Kingston Lopa and Sione Lalea. Oh, they're just 6'4". That's all. They've certainly got that length for days. And, when you talk about those true freshmen, I remember the spring game. Neem Offord's making a play, great play in the end zone, kind of a little bit of a fade ball, and he knocks it away from a very experienced receiver in Malik Benson. I think Trey McNutt made a play on Jamari Johnson, if I remember correctly. I mean, what is kind of your outlook for these true freshmen? Because those 2 guys specifically, I see their high school tape. I see them kind of make these plays, and they look like sophomores. They look almost like juniors when they're out there in the spring game making these plays. It's going to be hard to keep them off the field, Offord and McNutt. I mean, that's the way I feel. What's kind of your take? Because there is a lot in this room. I know they're 5-star talent, and there's lots of guys to go around, but it seems like they're going to find the way on the field possibly this season.
Well, Lanning always says, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And those are guys who have that superior body type. I mean, you just see them out on the field, and they're chiseled. They have a spring that ordinary athletes just don't have. So they're going to play early. Brandon Finney is another one who will make a bid to play. He'll be competitive. He'll make the room better because he has so much talent. I saw a photo on social media yesterday. It was Finney and Obadegwu working out back in Maryland because they're both Maryland guys. And oh my goodness, they're built like boxers. They're just absolutely carved, and they go 6'1", 6'2", and they have the bodies to match up against those elite receivers. And it was a little sad last year in the Big Ten championship game and the Rose Bowl. The Ducks gave up 15 plays of 20 yards or more. They were 79th in the country in December and January and giving up chunk plays. I mean, that is scary. They give in December and January, they gave up 7.77 yards per play. That is nightmarishly bad. Another member of the team that needs to step up is Coach Tosh Lupoy. He got out schemed in December and January. The Ducks got a little bit worked. How many times when you look back at those highlights is somebody just wide open for a big play? And that's coaching and planning and play calling. That Coach Lupoy talks a lot about self-scouting, and there's definitely some room for growth and improvement in his room from his end.
Yeah, to kind of circle this thing all the way back. This is a big year for Tosh because there are segments of that fan base out there that are really kind of they've seen the defensive performance, especially like you mentioned in the big games the last 2 seasons. Now there is some validity that says, hey, you need to get better, you need to get taller, you need to get faster, you need to get longer, like Chris Hampton, I think, said during this spring. And I think they're starting to get that this season, which is why I think this season is such a big year. It'd be like, okay, Tosh and Dan and this defensive staff have kind of identified the type of player and what players they want. Now let's see if their talent evaluations were right. But it's a big year for Tosh. Because in some of these bigger games towards the end of the season, that they certainly have been a little bit out of position. I remember the Rose Bowl. I mean, you go back and watch that game, even if you just go back and watch the 20-minute highlight video or that ESPN has up on their YouTube page or something like that. You watch the beginning of the play, guys are kind of turning their head, looking towards the sideline. They're out of position. You got to give credit to Chip for kind of scheming things up the way they did. But in a big game like that, you certainly gotta be in position. I'm excited, Dale. I'm excited about this defense. I think this defense has a lot of potential. I think when I look at the better passing attacks on the schedule, I probably look at Indiana as a good one. I think USC towards the end of the year is a good one. We'll see where Washington is and DeMond. I know there's a lot of hype with the DeMond this season, but I'm excited for this defense. I hope you're excited too. I really enjoyed this conversation today about defense.
Ted, I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. It's going to be a great season. Thanks for having me on.